right, there we go. There we go. Appreciate you guys waiting. I see the chat starting to fill up. Welcome one, welcome all. This is the Ikari Press YouTube channel, and we are also streaming live to the Facebook group Planet EJOBN. So if you are on one of the other platforms, because we're also on Periscope streaming and Twitch, the direct link to the chat is youtube.com/KariPress. But if you are on one of those platforms and you drop something in the chat, I will see it. Thank you. But I want to welcome Zuby to the channel. I'm a big fan. I've seen you on a lot of stuff. I've seen you on like Joe Rogan and watch your streams with like Ben Shapiro and stuff like. You have very interesting takes. So I wanted to reach out and see if you would come and join us today. So welcome, though. It's good to see you, my brother.
Thanks, bro. Happy to be here, man.
All right. So go back. Let's see. I started seeing you like about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Obviously, there was the thing with the world record. That thing went viral because people were like going in on it. But I actually respected that move when you did the weightlifting thing, because I get in so much heat when, and you know, I know people. I've worked with people that are like trans and all this kind of thing, and I respect those people. I don't have an issue with anyone that's transgender or any of that kind of thing. But I don't know. I just feel like if you say there are only two genders, that you get into all kind of crazy thing. I know J.K. I just read another article about J.K. Rowling. They're still trying to cancel her. She's got a new book coming out, and they're starting to like kill her with the reviews and everything. You know, so I don't know what made you want to do that in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it was just making a simple point, man. And it was also just using people's own logic, right? So for many, many years, you've had certain groups and activists and people of certain ideological belief systems who have been beating everyone over the head with the idea that a man is anyone who identifies as a man and a woman who is anyone who identifies as a woman. And it's that simple. And that this applies to sport, this applies to changing rooms, bathrooms, social situations, whatever it is, right? And they've said that it's that simple. If you ask these people, what is a woman? They will say a person who identifies as a woman. So I said, okay, I identify as a woman. And I went and I considerably broke the British women's deadlifting record in my weight class. And I simply posted that tweet just saying, hey, I keep hearing about how there's no biological strength advantage that men have over women in 2019. So watch me destroy the British women's deadlift record without trying. P.S. I identified as a woman while lifting the weight. Don't be a bigot, right? So it was just a very simple point. It's like, okay, well, if you're saying that's the logic and you're making the argument that there aren't fundamental biological differences here and everything comes down to this ideology and the way somebody self-identifies, then okay, here we go. And now if you have a problem with this, either you have to accept that what you're saying is not right or it's got some big holes in it, or you have to accept the fact that I am in fact the British women's deadlift record holder. There's nothing in between.
It obviously went viral, and I noticed your social media has like grown crazy. I was like, you're over what 24,000 people following you on Twitter, and I mean, you seem to have figured, because that's something over the last few years I've tried to work on. Different. My strongest is on Instagram, where I've got over 11,000 people following me on Instagram, but it took a while to build that. I've seen other people, they can, they seem to figure something out and it explodes. You might only have 1,000, and next thing you know, you got 6, 7, 10,000, 20,000. I'm curious about it because I saw a couple of your books, and that was one of the things you talked about. Then you've obviously got your fitness book as well. And I was like,
yeah, that's right.
I mean, how did you start kind of figuring out how to play the social media game?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's important to remember that I've been at all of this for a long time. So, I mean, I started out purely just as a musician. Of course, I'm still a musician. I still make my music. I'm going to release a new album next year. But everything started for me with just trying to promote my music. So I started on social media. I mean, I was one of the first people on Facebook. I've been on Facebook since 2004. Prior to that, I was on MySpace around
Oh
that
yeah,
same time.
MySpace, crazy.
Yeah, I've been on Twitter for over 11 years. I've been on Instagram so I've been on these platforms for a long time. So by the time my Twitter started really blowing up, you have to remember I'd been on the platform for over a decade. I probably had over 50,000 tweets by the time stuff started to really go viral. So for me, it took a decade to get to 15,000 followers, and then to go from 15,000 to 300,000 took about 14, 15 months. So it's been like a real spike for me. And yeah, I think that's the way a lot of things happen. So of course there are certain things you can do to increase your follower growth, increase your engagement, all that kind of stuff. And I do have a course. I've got two courses on that, in fact. One is called Conquering Twitter, which also covers monetization, how people can make money off of their Twitter accounts. And then I've got one just on growth and engagement, which I released a couple weeks ago, called Going Viral, which talks a lot about what I've learned over the whole period, and especially over the last 18 months, because that's something I also do. I do social media coaching. I help people who are trying to grow their audiences, etc. So yeah, there are a lot of different strategies and things like that, which there's some parallels across the different platforms, but there are also some things that are unique to each individual platform. And Twitter is one that I've certainly mastered Twitter. I mean, my account does about 100 million impressions a month. But then, I've also, yeah, it's going to clock 1 billion this year. But then also on, I've got a big following on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook as well. So I don't put as much time into those ones at the moment, but I know how to grow an audience on anything.
Like I said, my strongest one, the rules seem to be different on all the different platforms. Like I said, I pretty much figured Instagram out.
Okay.
Like I said, I've figured Instagram out. Working Twitter, I just over 3,000 followers on Twitter. YouTube, it's like every place is different, because some people are like, oh, make short videos, don't stream, don't do this, don't do that, this is how you build. But I wanted to talk to people like you who are quote unquote social media influencers and stuff, and kind of pick your brain a little bit, and maybe you drop a little game for myself and the audience, and kind of see what you're working with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, like I said, I've got a course, so I can't give away everything that's in the course. Right. But if I'm gonna tell people something that they can immediately take away, which is valuable, is to remember why people are on social media. Okay, people go to social media for two reasons. Number one is to be informed, and number two is to be entertained. So if you are putting out content, you want to make sure that you are hitting one or both of those things consistently. Because if you're just making posts, but they're not informative and they're not entertaining, then why would somebody follow you? You're not adding any value to their timeline or to their life. And most people don't really think of it this way. They just go on there and they kind of post whatever they want to post without really thinking, okay, is this informative? Is this value? Why would somebody follow me? Why would somebody engage in this, etc.? So a big thing, and this is valid across every single platform that exists and every single platform that will exist in the future, is focus on adding value to people's lives, whether that's making them laugh, teaching them something they don't know, informing them about something they may not know, generating conversations. All of that falls into information and entertainment. So that is really sort of the big key in terms of organic growth, without getting into sort of nitty gritty strategies and, a video should be this length and you should post like that, and this type gets more engagement than that type. Like, all of that is details, and that can change with any algorithm. But the fundamental thing that is organic and which is human is people wanting to follow people who they feel that they get some value from.
Okay, let's see. There you go. And let me acknowledge Uncle Hotep is in the chat. Man, brother, it's been so long since I streamed with Uncle Hotep. I love his content and enjoy him. But salute to you both. Do y'all thing. But yeah, thank you, Uncle Hotep, for stopping by. I'm a big admirer of his. Got to get you on the channel. But I also want to say that the audio from this will be on anchor.fm/Ikari Press, and it will also be on my podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. So I'm going to take that and I will rip this audio. So in case any of you stragglers happen to catch this later, you will get more Zuby all the time. I also have links to Zuby's website and his books and all that stuff in the description as well. But Zuby, I want to go. I kind of, I've been, like I said, I've been kind of looking over your life, and I was interested in some of. I remember the first time I started hearing about you when you start popping up. I kept hearing this British rapper, Zuby, and I was like, and then I saw you on the TV, and you sound like you from Maryland or something. You sound like you. I thought you was gonna come out like, yo, what's up, Mike? Get my record, and all that. And I was like, I felt very gypped when I saw that. It sounded like you grew up in Maryland somewhere, man. You'd be one of my cousins or something, So I was like, so where the accent at, bro?
That's so funny, man. This is something I deal with every single day of my life, no matter what country I'm in. So I was born in England, but I didn't grow up in England. So I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my family moved over there when I was 1. So I went to preschool, elementary school in Saudi Arabia up until 5th grade. And then when I was 11, I went to the UK for boarding school. So up until the age of 11, I was in the American schooling system. So I went to an international school. Most of my teachers were American. A lot of my friends were American. I was in a big expat community. And so, I used to sound 100% American. Like now it's somewhere in the middle, probably leans a bit more American than English. But I used to sound like totally like 100% American. But now I've been in the UK for a longer period, and it's moderated a little bit, but I'm never going to sound 100% English. My accent doesn't really change anymore.
Yeah, I did notice we were talking before we went live on the air, and it did sound like, just for a brief second, I heard an accent, then it like totally went back to like you could be in Virginia somewhere or whatever. Yeah, and I see. This is my editor in the chat there. This is Amanda Lamella. She edits my comic book. It is called Branded. You can get that there at ikaripress.com. It is thing if anybody is a comic book head. But yeah, she's a big fan of yours. I knew she was one. Nice. Yeah, I've had a lot of people going, oh yeah, I like Zuby, I like him. So I was like,
that's good.
You are very outspoken. So and there's so much. Matter of fact, yesterday there was something that you tweeted out, the thing about the diet and the depression and all that kind of thing, and it could now, because like I say, you did write a book on fitness. I don't know if you can see, but I am a disgusting fat body. So I'm a little out of shape. Well, probably a lot more than a little, but
that's temporary.
Yeah, I've actually, let's see, since 2018. At 2018, I was at 396 pounds, and when they weighed me just the other week, I was at 334. So I've been working, I'm trying to get under 300. That's something. Awesome. But one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about this in particular, some of the tweets you were responding to. I know it seemed like it started a storm. But I suffer from depression. I've talked about it on streams with different podcasts and stuff that I've been. So I've really suffered from that. Probably over 25 years. So that is something. Oh God, that was like, I don't know. I've heard what you said though about obviously what you put into your body can change maybe how your hormones are and all this kind of thing. So I kind of wanted you to kind of break that down a little bit and explain kind of where you were coming from when you were talking.
Yeah, sure. Wow. Okay. So let's see. So I think that when people talk about depression or being depressed, so firstly, let me put a disclaimer and say that I'm not an expert in I'm not an expert in terms of mental health and depression, in terms of having a master's or a PhD in the subject or anything like that. But I am someone who observes the world and tries to draw patterns and connections and just give my honest view on certain things. And it seems that when people talk about depression or being depressed, there's sort of two different things that are going on there. And I think primarily when people say that they are depressed, I don't think most people mean true depression, right? So I believe that there is something which is, true depression, where there is some sort of hormonal or chemical imbalance in someone's brain, regardless of their lifestyle, their nutrition, their diet. Like, there's something that is sort of fundamentally wrong there, right? There's something that's not right. However, when a lot of people, and I think this is the majority, say that they're depressed, what they mean is that they don't feel good, right? They're maybe going through a period of, feeling very sad or feeling very low or feeling, low energy or whatever the case may be. And your body feels good and you yourself feel good or feel bad largely based on your state and on your environment, right? So if somebody has a very poor diet, their nutrition is very poor, they're not drinking enough water, they're not sleeping very well, they don't exercise regularly, maybe they're in a bad relationship, they don't like their job, all as many of those things are piled on top of each other, I'm almost like, well, of course you're going to be feeling, inverted commas, depressed, right? Because you're not enjoying your life, you're not healthy, you're not in a good physical, mental state and space. And I think that when the majority of people talk about feeling depressed, they're actually talking about something like that. They're talking about something that can be solved without need of any sort of, drugs or therapy or anything like that. It's like, okay, let's get your diet on point. Let's get your nutrition on point. Let's make sure you're sleeping enough. Let's improve your lifestyle, right? If you're in a horrible relationship and you hate every hour you spend at work, like, I would feel so-called depressed, right? Like, because your body is telling you, like, I'm not in a good position, I want to change. So beyond anything chemical, like, well, I guess there could be something chemical going on there. I'm talking about it from that perspective, and from so many people I know and I've encountered and I'm acquainted with, so many people who, I mean, you can even see it in that thread. If you go and you look at the responses to the tweet, you'll actually see a lot of people who are saying, you know what, like, he's right. I used to feel depressed, or I had this, and then I started exercising regularly and I made this change and I made that change. And even if it didn't get rid of it completely, it's mostly fixed it, right? And I think, look, if someone has all of these things on point, they're, living a good life, they're in good physical shape, they're in good health, they're eating well, etc., and they still are having this feeling of depression, then that's what I would imagine is probably more what I would call true depression, right? That's probably a sign like, okay, if you've sorted all of these other things out and you're still feeling this way, then that's probably when, okay, you might need to get some therapy or maybe some kind of antidepressant or something like that. But I think a big mistake, and I think maybe perhaps even a dangerous mistake that's being made especially in modern Western society, is I think people are always wanting to kind of, firstly, I think it's being overdiagnosed, but then I also think that, and there are financial and incentive reasons for why they'd want to prescribe you something. You can't, there's not a lot of money to be made in selling, telling people to eat better, sleep better, and work out. But when it comes to, these prescription drugs and things like this, which especially in the US, it seems like they really, really prescribe them a lot. I don't think it's quite as bad here in the UK or in Europe, but in the States, it seems like they're just, whether it's children or adults, they're just giving people all of these things, rather than taking those first few steps and saying, okay, you know what, your lifestyle and your physical health is not good. Your lifestyle clearly has some problems which you can improve on over time. So why don't let's try to fix these things first. And then if the problem is still there, then we know we've got something deeper to deal with. So in more words, that's what I was getting at in the tweet. Yeah.
Well, I can definitely tell you from personal experience. I got diagnosed a few years ago with sleep apnea because I would sleep for hours and it just felt like I wasn't, getting any rest. And I actually went to a sleep center and they did the study on me and all that, and turned out I was barely getting any oxygen when I was sleeping, and they gave me the CPAP, and I started sleeping with that. And I gotta be honest, and the doctor even said, he's like, it's probably going to help you with weight loss and all that. You'll start feeling a lot better. And, I'd wake up and I have a whole lot more energy. And yeah, so it definitely helped me. I feel better than I did a few years ago. A lot of things as I guess as the weight continues to come off and
Mm-hmm.
all that. But I just and I definitely agree. I've got friends of mine, they've got small children and the kids are real hyper, and it just seems like the doctor immediately wants to put them on medication now. And
Yeah.
that's not how it was when I was, I was born in 75. And, it's like, I don't know. We had, it just seems like, yeah, let's drug them up now.
Mm.
And that, I don't think that's the solution.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, you've just touched on it. I feel the same way about ADD or ADHD, right? I think it's very, again, speaking from a non-expert perspective, but I don't think you need to be an expert to comment on these things, but it seems to be greatly overdiagnosed, right? Where were all these children with ADHD, 40 or 50 years ago, right? It wasn't a thing. And, you've got a 5-year-old boy and he's hyperactive and he's got a lot of energy. It's like, he's a 5-year-old boy. That's right? If he's lethargic and wants to lie there and just not do anything, that's the problem. But 5-year-old boys, 4-year-old, like they're supposed to be energetic. And again, might there be situations where, okay, like you've got an anomaly and right, there's something genuinely going wrong. That's one thing. But again, I think when they're doing all this and they're prescribing Ritalin or whatever other drugs they're giving these children, which is altering their brain chemistry, I'm like, wait, hang on a second. Is this necessary? Is this the best approach? What are the incentives that are even causing people to want to prescribe drugs? I think a drug prescription in most things should sort of be a last resort, right? It shouldn't be the first thing you go to. It shouldn't just be, okay, like there's this issue, there's this behavioral problem, there's this way this person is feeling, there's this and that. It's like, okay, take this pill. It's like, whoa, hold up a second. What else is going on here? What are the environmental factors? What's the nutrition looking like? What's the exercise looking like? Even with those kids, right? Are they getting enough exercise? I mean, if you try to keep a bunch of 4 or 5-year-olds like trapped in a room for hours and hours on end, and they start getting like agitated and they want to run around, or they start, it's like, of course, like that's why you have recess, that's why you have sports. That's why you have activities. Like children have a lot of energy. I say this as someone who's got 9 nieces and nephews, I know they have a lot of energy. So, wow. and that's fine, right? Let them run around and play fight and build things and knock things over. And just, that's kind of what they, that's just what they do. That's normal. Just like I think it's normal to feel negative or to feel unhappy if there are circumstances in your life, physically and environmentally, that are causing you to feel that way. That doesn't mean you need to take a pill. It just means you need to, at least like I said, to start with, you need to work on fixing those things. And it also comes down to just being honest with yourself. And I want to say, like, man, congrats on your weight loss so far. You said you lost 60 pounds, and I hope seriously, man, I hope that's a big loss. And I know you've got more to go, and I wish you all the best with that. Like I'm so encouraging of people who are trying to improve themselves, because a lot of people just won't do it. And it's a problem. I mean, it's bad for them, but it's this thing where it's like, I'm very big on personal responsibility. And it doesn't mean that everyone needs to be like, no one is the perfect version of themselves. Nobody has fulfilled their total potential on this earth. But if someone can look at themselves and go, hang, you know what? I'm not in shape. Let me make some effort. Let me take some steps to do this. I'm going to start an exercise program. I'm going to change my diet, etc. Like, I salute that. I applaud it. I encourage it. Like, I'm there to like help anyone who's willing to do this. But someone has to be willing to at least acknowledge it and be willing to make a change before anything can be done. Because you nor I can exercise for anybody else. You nor I can eat for anybody else, right? Like, the food I eat goes into my body. The exercise I do affects my body. It doesn't affect anybody else. It doesn't go into anybody else or out of anybody else, whatever. Like, that's totally, if you're an adult, that is 100% on you. And that's part of why I'm so into training, and I'm so into going to the gym, and I'm into lifting weights and all that. Not just because of not just because of some superficial thing of like, yeah, I want to look buff, I want to have a 6-pack. Of course, that's great too. But really, it's because, number one, it keeps my own equilibrium, but because it can be applied to so many other things. Like if you can take that level of responsibility and discipline, like if you, like I can guarantee that you going from, what did you say, 390 to 330? 394 to 330. I can guarantee you that has changed more than just your body.
Oh yeah, well, big thing. I'm a diabetic, so I was on insulin, and my endocrinologist was able to take me up. I was like, that was good, not having to take insulin anymore. I dropped down, and that was something that I was really, really happy about.
Of course.
But like I said, obviously still got more work to do. I'm still doing my little routines and do my thing every day, and have to weigh and kind of watch what you eat and not eat snacks and stuff as much as I used to be like tearing them up, but I'm just saying when you switch your habits, you'll start seeing some of that other stuff, and it's like, yeah. So I definitely applaud a lot of what you were saying there, because I was like, I'm trying to get ripped like you. I saw you on the cover of your book and everything. You were just all spit it out, and I was like, okay. I don't know if I can get like that, but it would be nice, So.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you, man. And yeah, and the thing is, you can apply that same thing to everything, like to anything. If you can apply that same mindset that it took to do that, and then it's taking you to continue with it, consistency, discipline, willpower, having a plan, sticking to the plan, staying motivated, like all of that stuff, you can apply that to anything. You can apply it to creating a podcast. You can apply it to building a business. You can apply it to a relationship. You can apply it to everything, because it's those same things: consistency, perseverance, discipline, etc. If you can just foster those things in general in your life, from the kitchen table to the gym to the workplace to everything, then it's just, to me, it's kind of all the same. There's that sort of saying that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, which has some truth in it. It has some truth in it. And I don't think that, and another thing that's important is people have to remember that this sort of comes back to what we were saying initially, is that the mind and the body are not two totally separate things, right? People talk about mental health and physical health as if they're two totally different categories, but there's a huge overlap between mental health and physical health, right? It's actually quite rare to see someone who's in great physical shape who has, poor mental health. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it's pretty rare. And actually, a lot of people who are not in a great state in terms of mental health, there are some underlying physical issues going on there in terms of their physical health, whether that is, sometimes that can be out of their control, right? There are things that are just out of our control, and sometimes people get unlucky and they just, catch something, or they get diagnosed with something, or they inherit some kind of disease or something like that. But these things are really connected, and by getting stronger, by losing fat, by just getting in better cardiovascular shape, whatever shape it is, that has a cognitive benefit as well. That'll help you think more clearly. It'll help you be able to work for longer in terms of your mental work. All these things are really interrelated, and I think people make a mistake by separating them out totally. I think if people are having a conversation about mental health, then I think the conversation about physical health should be very strongly linked to it. And I can even see this myself. I mean, I've been going to the gym for more than half my life now, but say, for example, during the lockdown period, when the gyms closed and everything, that since my teens, that's the longest I've been without going to the gym. And I was still exercising. I was still, doing my push-ups, and I have a pull-up bar and stuff, but I wasn't getting my full exercise in. And that, coupled with, the loneliness and stuff like that from not being able to see friends and see family, I mean, that took a toll on me mentally, right? I'm like one of the most optimistic, upbeat, low neuroticism people out there. And even I was like, man, like, I'm just so much more irritable. I have less energy, like, despite the fact I'm not exercising in like, I'm waking up and I'm feeling a bit groggy. I'm not waking up with the usual bounce. Like, I'm just getting a bit more angry. Seeing dumb comments on social media is just making me a little more irritated than it normally does, and then like I started going to the gym again when it reopened. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I'm back to my usual self. And so, I saw that in just, that's a sample size of one, but I know that a lot of other people were sort of saying the same thing. And I think when it comes to training and diet, a lot of people don't understand just how much it can change the way you feel until they actually make the change for themselves, and they sort of feel that firsthand.
Okay, so you kind of touched on it. Okay, so 2020 got a global pandemic going on, and there's an election year right here in the States. You're obviously over in the UK, but you guys see what's going on over in the States. For someone in the UK or just international, what does America look like when you guys are seeing it on television?
I see. I don't have a television, so I see America mostly.
TV.
Yeah, I don't have a TV. I haven't had a TV for 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm still informed though, but I get a lot of my information from social media and other things like that. Obviously, I spend a lot of time there. And with me, I'd say my view on the U.S. is a lot more nuanced because I've got a primarily American following, and I've spent a bit traveled to a lot of the States, and I've spent time there and met a lot of people and stuff. So I understand that a Twitter feed or seeing stuff on Instagram or even on the news is not going to be a clear picture of people's. It's not going to be that representative of people's sort of day-to-day lives and day-to-day situations. But in terms of what I am seeing there is it does look like stuff is amping up in a lot of ways. And it does seem like there is, again, I think on the real life level, I don't think there's a dangerous level of polarization and division, but I think that there are certainly forces at work, which have been at work for a long time, that are really, really trying to divide people, and polarize people on certain lines, amp it up, especially in this time before an election, and make sure that people are at each other's throats, whether that's red versus blue, or it's black versus white, or it's men versus women, or it's this versus that, because that's what the media does. I put the blame primarily on the media myself. That's what the media does, and it's also what politicians do. And they've done this from time immemorial. They do it in every country. But I think in the U.S., for a lot of reasons, that is easier to do, right? I think because the U.S. is legitimately, in almost every sense of the word, the U.S. is probably the most diverse country in the world. Certainly the most diverse country in the Western world. And I mean that in every sense of the word. Racially, ethnically, ideologically, geographically. You've got a huge country out there. You got to remember the UK. The whole UK is smaller than like certain states, right? The whole UK is smaller than California or Texas or Alaska or a lot of these other states. And even in terms of population, I mean, England and California have pretty similar populations, right? The UK is all one time zone. Even in terms of the ethnic diversity, I mean, in the US, you have 13% black population. I don't know, Latino, maybe like 20% or something like that. You've got, in the UK, I mean, black people in the UK are like 2% of the population? Something like that. 1 or 2%. And so the UK and most of Europe is actually a lot more homogenous in a lot of ways, even ideologically. So in the US, for example, if you look politically, I would say that the Republican Party is to the right of the British Conservative Party, right? So the conservatives in the USA are more conservative in general than the conservatives in the UK and in Europe in general. And some of the, maybe not the typical liberals, but like the progressives in the USA almost seem to be like to the left of the leftists or liberals in the UK. So on all of these different levels, you've just got a lot more sort of fracture lines, like fault lines, where people can sort of stick in that wedge and drive people apart. Of course, in the USA as well, you've got, the history is different. The history of black people in America is very different to the history of black people in the UK. Okay? And so and the history is different. Historically, the laws are different. The way people are split up geographically is different. And then the country's just huge. It's a gigantic country. It's the third biggest country in the entire world in terms of population, and the biggest country in the West. So and then you guys have, of course you've got things like the First Amendment and the Second Amendment.
The Second
right? In the UK, there's no gun debate, right? There's no gun debate over like gun. It's just like, citizens don't have guns. I support the Second Amendment, by the way. I think it's a great thing. But in many ways, the USA is sort of like, and we also have to remember the USA is a new country, right? The US it's a relative. How long has the US been around for? 300 and what is it? 1776?
So a little over 200 years. So,
yeah, what, 250 years?
Something like that.
Right. So the USA is, my brother put it in an interesting way. I was speaking to him over the weekend. He said the USA is like an adolescent in terms of the world's countries, right? So the other countries have sort of, the USA is still in this temperamental phase, right? It hasn't been around for so long. It's like it's this experiment where you've just got all these different people and you're trying to get what works for all of these 330 million Americans who all have different cultures, different backgrounds, different ideas, all of this stuff. And I think that's one of the things I like the most about the US is it's just so, it makes it such a dynamic place. And the highs can be very high, but I think also the lows can be very low. But yeah, I think at a time like this, when tension rises, then it's more of a powder keg than a country like the UK is, I think.
Well, that's actually a great point, because I tend to see, like, I used to watch Bill Maher all the time, and I noticed he would speak in, like, he especially pre-COVID, he was touring a lot and he actually seemed like he come to Nashville quite a bit. At least once, twice a year, he would come and play, like, at the Ryman where the Grand Ole Opry was and stuff. And he would, he would be here and he would like, oh, I love the South. And this, he seemed like he would talk in generalities. Like, I've noticed a lot of people that don't live in the South, they be like, oh, the South, that's where the racism is. The racism is in the South. It's like, oh yeah, if you want to get away from the racism, just leave the South. And it's like, it only exists here. And I'm like, I've been in the South for 45 years, and I've been in other places, other parts of the country, and every region is different. It's like if you go out to California, it's different. California, every section of California is different. The culture, you go if you're in the Bay or wherever, so the country is very diverse. Just here in Tennessee, there's a different vibe, like in East Tennessee, as opposed to like I'm in Middle Tennessee. If you go to like West Tennessee, like especially around there in Memphis and stuff like that, the flavor is different. It's just the culture and everything. It's just, and if that's just this state, you have to kind of figure it's gonna be different all over the place. Like if I start heading up towards like Virginia and Maryland, or if I get up into like Boston and New York and all these different places, the culture, and just the way people vibe with each other is different. And that's why I was like, I always cringe when people just make like blanket statements and generalities and stuff like that. Cause this is, America is huge. It's not one thing. So,
no, America is massive. You got to remember, going from California to New York, that's like me going geographically, that's like me going from London to Moscow, like flying over like 8 or 9 different countries. In terms of, the distance and the time zones, it's like it's the same thing. Now, of course, you're not going to get, as much diversity and difference across like, Europe as a whole as the US, because the US still is a country. But in between each of these states, and as you alluded to, even in between some of the cities, go even just between Los Angeles and San Francisco, different climate, right? Different climate, totally different appearance, different look, different culture, very different demographic and type of people who are living in each city. When I was in the States from September to November last year, I went to 11 different cities in, I think, 6 or 7 different states. And so I really got an amazing opportunity to just see so much of that diversity, because I've been to the States before, but normally I've just, gone to New York for a few days, or just gone to Orlando for a few days, just an individual place. But I spent 9 weeks out there, and I was really talking to people, and I was going to different places, and I was really getting to know each individual area. So I spent time in California, then I was in Texas, then I went to Georgia, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., New York, and I was like, wow, okay, this is and I mean I've seen more of the U.S. than most U.S. citizens have,
I can imagine.
which is right, which is kind of crazy in itself. But then again, and then also, I think I've been to 34 countries in my life so far. So when I talk on a lot of things, and I think this is why, I didn't set out to be some kind of social or cultural commentator, which I've sort of stumbled into. But I think the reason why a lot of people are interested in my perspectives is because it doesn't come from, I don't come from just one perspective. So I'm not, when I say things or when I comment on things, I tend to be talking from a, still limited, but a more global perspective. As someone who grew up in, I lived in Saudi Arabia for 19 years. I've lived in the UK and gone to school and university here for a long time. I've spent a lot of time in the USA. My family background is from Nigeria. And then beyond that, I've traveled to all of these other countries. So when I make observations, I can kind of compare things and have something to compare them to, right? If it was just like, okay, I'm from London and I've lived my whole life in London and I've never really left London or whatever, then that's my default and I can't really compare anything else to it. But with me, on both the country level and on a city level, I can say, okay, I can compare the UK and Saudi Arabia. I can compare the USA and the UK, because despite the fact that a lot of people seem to think that these countries are very similar, probably because we share a language, there are some very fundamental differences between the UK and the US. And there are some things that people in the US totally, again, generalizing, really don't get about the UK. And then there's a lot of things that people in the UK really don't get about the USA, right? We've already touched on actually a couple of those things. Like a great one would be the Second Amendment, right? It's pretty hard to find British people who understand the Second Amendment, right? Like they just think it's like the UK and the European perspective almost in general is like, oh, why don't they just ban guns, right? They think like people think it's just that, people just think it's that simple, And I'm just like, no, you're coming at this from, and you can understand why that is, because if you've grown up in a country like the UK where, the police don't have guns here, right? So, like if that's what you're used to and you haven't kind of seen the other, and you don't understand the history and you don't understand the context and the culture and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's not that different to someone in San Francisco who totally doesn't understand why this person in Arizona or in Texas or in Tennessee is all like pro-gun, and they don't get it. They'll see someone in Starbucks with an AR-15 on their back, and they're like, "This is crazy! Ban them! What are they doing? Like these crazy people, And it's just that cultural. It's that cultural clash. But when people travel more and have friends from different places, and rather than trying to just like cast judgment on things immediately, if they really try to understand where it comes from, then even if after that they still don't agree, they can at least understand the perspective. And I think that's important. I think that's when when you have someone who is worldly and sort of educated in the true sense, is when they can understand the different perspectives and perhaps even argue them, even if it's not necessarily their own one, right? So I think I'm personally very much in favor of the Second Amendment for Americans. Like, I'm not trying to bring it over to the UK, but I could make a sound argument against it, and I could also make a very sound argument for it. And I think that with anything that I have a strong opinion on, or a solid formed opinion on, I can do that, right? So I can argue the other side, and I can kind of put myself in the brain or mind of someone else and think, okay, this is why they think this way. So even with, a great example is me growing up in Saudi Arabia. Like, I get a lot of questions about, what was WoW? Because people in the West tend to just hear like crazy stuff about Saudi Arabia. And they're like, oh my gosh, you lived there for 19 years? Like, what was that like? And again, and the way a country like Saudi works, and the culture, and even some of the laws and everything, is very different to the UK. It's very different to the USA, right? And, you know, there are things that I like and there are things that I dislike about all of these countries and all of these cultures, but I can understand whether or not I agree with everything. And this is something people don't get, because if I say something positive about Saudi, they think that I'm condoning the worst aspects of what the government does there and stuff like that. And it's like, no, I'm just trying to explain why and how Saudi is the way it is. Just like I'm trying to explain why and how the UK is this way, or why the USA is that way, etc. And I'm just trying to offer people some perspective and kind of get them to open their minds and at least challenge and consider what they think they believe.
Okay. Well, okay. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because the last few months have been very strange, and starting with the death of George Floyd, the riots broke out. One thing I didn't expect were the international. That surprised me, because we've had these killings before. These deaths have happened. I mean, I go back. I even remember going back, like Rodney King, watching, that footage just kept airing on television. And there wasn't, people were like, and then it was like a news cycle and they just moved on. It's like all around that time, it was that. There was the Los Angeles riots, and and I remember OJ driving down the freeway in the Bronco and the whole thing. It's like, it was just news. I was like, okay, and I got to be honest, whether it was sad or not, I didn't expect the reaction. That it was like a powder keg went off or something. And I really didn't expect to see some of the stuff that happened internationally. Why do you think that happened?
Yeah, sure. It's a few things. So there's a saying, I don't know if you're familiar with it, that when the U.S. sneezes, the world catches a cold. Or sometimes I say, the U.K. catches a cold, because I get a lot of questions, for example, of, why am I interested in stuff that's going on in the U.S.? And it's because the U.S. is the leader of the Western world. The U.S. is just a world leader. So things that happen in the USA, whether that's culturally or politically or, even in terms, look at music, right? What happens in music in the U.S., it affects the rest of the world. Hip hop started in the USA, but now, you've got hip hop in every single country. Every country you go under the planet, they have their local language hip hop and rap music, etc. So what happens in the U.S. does affect other people. In terms of this specifically, I think it's primarily two factors. So I think, firstly, it's what I just said, but then social media, huge factor. Social media is a huge factor, especially because the killing of George Floyd, there was a full video, right? Had there not been the video, then I don't think the reaction would have been as it was. Well,
I would challenge you on that, because there was a video with the Philando Castile killing. And it didn't seem to get that same reaction. And so I was, like I said, I just kind of thought I was like, oh man, rest in peace to that brother. And I thought it was going, next thing you know, things just start popping off. And like I said, it popped off here, but then I started seeing that there were protests in other countries. And I was surprised by that. And that didn't happen before. So but I think maybe people seeing things on social media, the world is more connected than it used to be.
Yeah, and look, you have to remember, people act like the George Floyd killing was the same as all the others. And I think that's a huge mistake, because it wasn't. It wasn't, right? So regardless of people's feelings, like a lot of these police killings most of them are contentious, right? I know people are making the George Floyd one contentious, but a lot of them in the past have been contentious, right? They've been, you might be, you're not sure. Yeah. Like there's questions in the air, or even the video that comes out, it's not like a full length video. People just see a clip. Yeah. And from a clip, you don't really know what happened. With the George Floyd one, it was 9 minutes. The guy was kneeling on his neck for almost 9 minutes. You could see that he was unarmed. You could see that, it wasn't necessary to do that. You could see the bystander reaction and everything, so people couldn't watch that video and be like, okay, but, because when that one happened, I know a lot of people who, tend to lean towards defending the cops almost at all costs. And even most of those people were like, no, Like this one was, this is way past the line kind of thing. Whereas with others, it's been like, oh, maybe the person was reaching for a weapon, or we don't know this story. Did they charge the officer? Were they arresting? Like it's more contentious. But this one was just like, boom, very clear. And then the big second factor, of course, is the lockdown. Big factor is the lockdown, right? So people had been locked in their houses for 2-3 months at this point, 2-3-4 months, and people are already, people are bored. People are not working. People even want a reason to go out there. Like people are like, man, I'm tired of being stuck in my house. I want to go outside. And then this thing happens. And so all of these things combined, like the emotional reaction plus the plus seeing the video and seeing this, and then the protests themselves even sort of being condoned by certain authority figures. I think both in the USA, in the UK, across Europe, in different places, I think people were just like, you know what, let's just go out there and let's march. And I mean, in some ways it was a little bit bizarre because, again, in the UK, I think in total last year, don't quote me on this, but I think the police in the UK last year killed 2 people. I think they killed 2 people. It might be 2 unarmed people. I'm not sure. Maybe 2 unarmed people. One of which was someone who was, I think, planning a terrorist attack or something. So we can't even pretend that the UK likes to pretend it has the same issues as America. And, sometimes it does, but oftentimes it doesn't. So if someone in the UK is making a case for police brutality or unfair police killings in the UK, it's not a real argument, right? They're not really, because it's just not, the issue is even contentious in the USA, right? Depending on people's feelings, they'll say, some people say it's a big issue, some people say it's not a big issue, but the police in the USA, justified or unjustified, we know that they kill, I think, thousands of people. Thousands, fair to say, thousands a year, right?
Yep.
I think. And yeah, I believe. Yeah, I want to say high 100. Yeah, I think the police kill, let's say the police kill, I believe, I could look up the number, but I think the police in the US say kill over 1,000 citizens a year. Okay? And the majority of those are going to be justified killings, but that's the situation. Whereas in the UK, you're probably talking single digits. So on no level can people pretend that, okay, this is totally the same. Even when it comes to certain issues, like I'm not a fan of talking about like racial politics and stuff like that. I end up in these conversations, but I find it boring. But again, even in the UK, it's like, the histories are different. So, the UK doesn't have, of course, the British Empire was heavily involved in, the transatlantic slave trade and whatnot. But in the UK itself, the UK doesn't have the same legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and redlining and all of these sort of grievances that create these fault lines in the USA. The UK doesn't have that history. And it doesn't mean there's no racism or something like that or unfair treatment in British history, but to make it seem like they're equivalent, to me, is very disingenuous. And I don't think it's particularly helpful, but I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think between the UK and the USA, there's certainly a link, and there's a sort of kinship, I guess, in a way, even on a political level, right? The UK and US are allies. People speak the same language. That's a big one, right? I think if the language were different between the UK and the USA, then I think it would be more obvious how the countries are different. But I think people are like, oh, we speak English, they speak English, and, culture-wise and music-wise and entertainment, movies, we all like enjoy that same stuff. We have that sort of shared culture. So every country in the Anglosphere is sort of lumped together in that regard. Whereas in many aspects, the UK might be more similar to France or Germany or Austria or Belgium in many ways, but we don't share the language. So despite the fact that, some aspects of the legal system and the history and whatever might be closer to those countries, there's more of a disconnect because it's difficult because we speak a different language. If you don't speak French or you don't speak German or you don't speak, Hungarian or Croatian or whatever language, then there's that barrier. Whereas in the US, any British person can just go over to the US and interact with almost everybody, and they can talk and they can travel, and they have no barriers in that regard. So we have this assumption that these countries are very, very similar, despite the fact that there are some fairly fundamental differences.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because I get asked this a lot. My friends are very diverse, and for whatever reason, I seem to be like, when people say, "Oh, I'm not racist. I've got black friends," I seem to be that black friend for some reason. So I seem to be that black friend. So I noticed that I get asked by my non-black friends what I feel about Black Lives Matter. And I've often said that, to me, there are two Black Lives Matter. There is the grassroots movement, and I think that is what you see a lot of. At least it started out, a lot of the protests and stuff out in the streets. That's what I think the grassroots was pushing that. But there's a corporate Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And I'm not down with that. I gotta be the corporate Black Lives Matter is, they're trying to privatize, because I tell people I'm black 24 hours a day. I'm not black just during Black History Month. I'm not black because we at the McDonald's Corporation want you to know that Black Lives Matter. When I see that and the NBA supports Black Lives Matter. It's like they're pushing a narrative and the NBA's been around for 60 some odd years, 70 years or whatever, that, the NFL, all these sports are now they're like Black Lives Matter, all this, and it's like, it's very inauthentic. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, I think that's the more corporate side of it, where it's like, hey, we're Chick-fil-A and we're going to come out and we're going to say that Black Lives Matter, and please come on in and get a chicken sandwich. Of course, yeah. And matter of fact, what was it? A couple months ago, Popeyes got in trouble on social media because they tweeted out, "We at Popeyes know we would be nothing without Black Lives," and it kind of made it look like, so wait a minute.
Oh gosh.
I was like, wait a minute. And then they deleted the tweet and everything, and I was like, so you just want us to buy the chicken? That's what you want. Yeah, that's right. And it just seemed a little weird, because I was like, we at Popeyes know we'd be nothing without Black lives. All this kind of. So I don't know if my take on Black Lives Matter is the same as yours, but I'd like you to kind of, obviously you see it and everything, but like I said, I think there's two. There's,
Yeah, I mean, I might even take it further and say I think that it means that it's three things. I think that you have Black Lives Matter, the sentence, which nobody disagrees with, right? Everybody agrees with the sentence, unless you're actually a psychopath, right? Like a true, KKK person, whatever. Or even KKK people might even think that Black Lives Matter. They just might not want to be around them. But the sentence, it runs unopposed, right? Don't kick puppies, right? Don't shoot babies. Black Lives Matter, right? Obviously. So I think that's number one. I think that's the one everyone agrees with. Then I think you have, like you said, the movement, which is what I think most people who are out protesting on the street, or a lot of people who hashtag it on social media, etc., that's what they're sort of generally supporting. And then there's a crossover with that with the organization itself. So Black Lives Matter is an organization, or in fact a multitude of organizations, because there's also BLM UK, and that is an organization which has very specific goals. They have quite a specific LGBT agenda in there. They have a specific agenda about where funding should go from the police to other places. They have quite a feministy thing in there. It's not all about Black lives. And when it is about Black lives, it's specifically about Black lives who are killed by police officers in dubious circumstances. It's founded by Marxists, trained Marxists as they call themselves, etc. So I think those are the three things. And number one, like I said, everybody agrees with. Number two, I think there are parts that I personally agree with, and there's parts that I disagree with, both in terms of the message and also in terms of the method. And then the third one, I oppose. I don't just not support, I actually oppose, right? I think that a lot of what they are proposing would be damaging for people in general, and actually quite damaging for Black people specifically, based on what I've seen. I think when you're promoting ideas such as defunding or abolishing the police, or you're trying to overthrow capitalism, or you're trying to disrupt the nuclear family, in their own words, stuff like that, I think that would actually have a significantly negative impact on Black people and society in general.
It's already had a significant effect. I mean, just in my lifetime, we've seen fewer and fewer Black couples. There's so many Black, just go back like 40, 50 years, Black women are having children out of wedlock at a astronomical rate now.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That doesn't make me Uncle Tom to say that. Those are facts.
No.
Yes. I mean, just speaking of fact does not, it's, I don't know. I get a lot of flack when I say that, because I've, just like I said, I've been on this earth 45 years, almost 46 now. And I've just, from when I was born, I was born in Alabama, and the Civil Rights Bill had just been signed maybe 6 years before I was born. And then,
wow, yeah.
So it was, the whole thing. So just watching, everything's a lot better than what it was. It's like, my brother and his wife, they've got 4 kids, and he's in an interracial marriage, and it's so much better than what it would have been. It's just way better. And, I don't know. I see things, but obviously we have a little bit more of the mountain to climb. But I think with all these young people, there's a lot of good young people out there, and you definitely need to lean on the younger generation to kind of help push us forward.
Most definitely, and I think people need to make sure that the direction things are moving is forward, because so this is something that's not said enough, and this is that not all change is good. Change is often good, and we want as societies to generally be progressing, but I don't think it's correct to have an assumption that societies always are progressing towards something better, right? So just because things are changing doesn't mean that things are always changing for the better. And they might be in some ways, but in other ways they're not. So if you look at the rate of single motherhood, as you've touched on, not just amongst Black Americans, but amongst Americans in general, amongst Westerners in general, right? The rate of single motherhood, it has increased very significantly. It's more than doubled or tripled or quadrupled in certain demographics. More and more boys and girls growing up without fathers. There are other things that have gotten better. Crime rates have generally come down. But then you have things like, depression is on the rise. Anxiety is on the rise. Of course, we touched on earlier, obesity levels are on the rise, right? More and more people are dying of heart disease and type 2 diabetes and other things that are, in fact, preventable. So just because something changes doesn't always mean that it's all good, right? So I think as a society in general and a culture, we need to sort of be careful. I mean, this is where the sort of balance between, I'm not huge on political labels, but it's like, when you think of what it means to be conservative or what it means to be liberal or to be progressive, it's like you want to conserve the things that work, right? Like human beings have been around for a long time, right? We think we have all these new ideas, but a lot of ideas have already been tried in the past, right? We've tried a whole lot of different ways of structuring society, structuring laws, etc. So I think it's like we should be trying to make sure we conserve the stuff that works and the stuff that is proven to work, and then to change the things that we don't seem to think are working, and make sure we don't make them worse in the process. And I think when it comes to things like family and family structures, we know what works. Everybody knows what works, right? We know that the ideal is to have a married couple, 2 parents in the household, have a mother and a father present and involved in the children's lives, etc. Like we know that.
I find some people would find that to be like, what? Well, why does it have to be a man and a woman in the house? It's like these are conversations that I've found myself having.
I know.
And I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It's like, people want to question everything. And it's like, look, you can question things, but we know what works, right? Like, so this isn't even like a political statement, right? You can look at data, okay? So look at the data between, averages, of course, right? This is not saying everybody who is raised under a two-parent roof ends up doing great, or those who are not don't do well. Not at all. But you can look at the stats and you can see that, oh wow, okay, if a boy grows up without a father, he's, I don't know, something like 10 to 20 times more likely to go to prison, far more likely to drop out of school, far more likely to get involved in drugs, gangs, all kinds of problems, and also more likely to then himself have children out of wedlock and sort of carry on this cycle, etc. Same goes for women, but with boys and men in particular, you can really see some of the ways that manifests, and we're dealing with this on a daily basis. And it's like, look, facts are facts. Facts don't have a political position. And whoever says a fact, the fact is correct, whether it's being said by somebody you like or somebody you don't like, somebody you agree with, somebody, a fact is a fact. So I think we need to, I think in the effort to destigmatize certain things or to accept or include certain things or certain ideas into society, a lot of people have forgotten that there is an ideal and there is a standard, right? And that doesn't mean everybody is going to meet the standard, and it doesn't mean that you should be cruel or unfair or be discriminatory against people who don't meet a certain standard or a certain ideal or whatever, people who are outside of the norm. But that doesn't mean that there is no norm or there is no standard or there is no ideal, etc. So I think as a society, right, you always want to be conserving the things that are good and that are proven to work, and perhaps proven to work over centuries or proven to work over millennia. And then the things that are either unfair or discriminatory or just aren't really working or whatever, those are the things where the change should take place. It doesn't mean you have to like tear down the entire building because you want to redecorate one of the bedrooms. It's like, no, just redecorate the bedroom. But if the foundations are good, keep the foundations. If the general structure is good, keep the general structure, and then we can just make this change here incrementally, rather than try to blow up the entire thing. Because look, it's far more easy to make a complicated system worse than to make it better, and that's the reality, right? If you open up the hood of your car and you're not a mechanic and you just start messing with stuff, you're far more likely to break something than you are to make the car run better. And human beings and human society is extremely complex. Like I said, if you look at a country like the US, you have 330 million people there. And I understand there are a lot of problems. There are also a lot of great things about the place. But if you just kind of go in there and you start wanting to like rip the whole thing apart to, tinker under the hood without really knowing what you're doing and thinking about it and having some balanced opinions there, then there's a good chance that, stuff might be being made worse. Because you want to make sure you keep the stuff that is good and that is working.
Okay, I want to let you touch on this because I thought this was interesting from the leftover in the chat. But the message of anti-racism turned to overt anti-whiteness. This progressive movement has progressed off a cliff. What do you think about that?
I think it's accurate. And it's something that I think more conservative-leaning people have been warning about for a long time. Right? I think that people are suckers for words, right? It's like, just because something is called anti-racism or something is called Black Lives Matter or something is called anti-fascism, it doesn't mean that, North Korea is called the Democratic Republic of Korea, Democratic People's Republic, right? So it doesn't mean that, not everything is exactly what it says on the tin. And a very, unfortunately effective but very common thing is to, if you want to push an agenda, is you call it something that people can't disagree with. And you see this all the time. Look at the whole Black Lives Matter conversation, right? Anyone who has a problem with the organization or with some of the actions or the movement, whatever, so you don't think Black Lives Matter? And it's just like, come on, man. Like, are people really this thick? It's like, you see the same with Antifa. If someone says something against Antifa, they're like, oh, so you're a fascist. You support they're called anti-fascist. So if you have any problem with them, even if they're beating innocent citizens over the head with bricks and destroying buildings, then it's because you support fascism. And it's just like, It's just like, no. And, you see the same thing now with this so-called anti-racism. Anti-racism is not purely about, it's not even mostly, I don't think. It's not about, actually trying to stop legitimate racism. It's this whole ideology that, it's very divisive. It's identity politics to the max. It's saying, it's defining whiteness and defining blackness and saying that, everything is, firstly, everybody is racist, right? And we need to see race more, not see it less. And whiteness and white people inherently are racist, and they inherently are oppressors, and they inherently uphold white supremacy. If they know that, then if they acknowledge it, then they are woke, and if they don't acknowledge it, then that's you either get white guilt, or you get white fragility, depending on whether you acknowledge it or you don't. And if you're a black person, or any person who's non-white, so-called person of color, don't like that term,
hate that term.
then not a fan. Then you're somehow the victim, and the system is always to blame, and other people are to blame, and whatever. And it's just very divisive. It creates resentment. It's toxic. I think the concept in itself is inherently actually racist, right? Because the claim that all white people are racist is racist in itself. Right? Making an entire judgment on a collective based on their skin color is what we call racism. And then, of course, the people who say this will say only white people can be racist because they have the power and the privilege. It's just word games. It's word games to push a particular ideology. And people who are sane and who are moderate just need to stand up to it and, reject these ideas and, stop feeling guilty about things and just say, like, look, I'm not going to be blamed for things that I haven't done, and I'm not going to be called things that I'm not. Like, don't call people who racist who are not racist. Don't call people that, it's just, I don't see any positive to it, right? It's one of those few things where all I see is negative. Like, I don't see the upside of having these university courses or these training things where they're kind of forcing people to make these sort of confessions about acknowledging their privilege and acknowledging their own racism and how they're complicit in these evil structures and all this and that. And then at the same time, making non-white people feel like they're somehow lesser than, or that they're victims and that they're being oppressed, and that their own, perhaps even their own friends, or maybe their own wife or their own husband or their own teachers and professors are, inherently against them or stopping them from succeeding or something like that. Number one, I don't think it's correct, right? Number one, it's just not correct factually. And then number two, I just think it does more harm than good. I think if someone is going to believe something that is not 100% provable and known and correct, then let it at least be something that benefits them. Let it at least be something that's positive and benefits society, not something that divides people even more and puts people at each other's throats.
Okay, so you kind of touched on it when you were giving your answer, but we've seen the rise of cancel culture. I just I was surprised. I think it was 2019 when Kevin Hart was supposed to, he's supposed to host the Oscars, and they found like tweets from like 9-10 years ago or something, and then they were like, if you don't say this, you don't apologize, and all that. And I was actually proud of him. But like, look, I'm sorry I offended you, but I'm not going to like bow down and do all this, it's like, yeah. And so he gave that up. I was like, that's kind of the way I would handle those type of situations. I've seen people like J.K. Rowling, but she kind of got that FU money, so she doesn't have to, they're coming for her now though. And what's it, the young lady from The Mandalorian? I saw that she said something about people having their pronouns in their bios on Twitter and stuff, and they just started swarming on them for the last few days. Yeah. They have been going at her and trying to get her. Some people were like adding Disney, trying to get her fired from the show. Yeah. All this stuff, and I'm like, how did we get here? How did we get to that? It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you know what? By look, a lot of these trans rights activist people are not good people. Period. Okay. A lot of social justice warrior types are not good people, and I'm tired of them getting away with this idea that they always mean well or that they're good people, because it's not true. I've dealt with enough of these people, right, over the years to know that they are not the ones with the moral high ground. Okay? If you are performing or you are condoning violence or you are trying to get somebody to lose their job or not be able to take care of their family or not just be able to sort of exist and integrate into society because you disagree with their opinion, all right? They haven't done any crime or whatever, but you disagree with their opinion. You're not the good guy. You're not the good guy. If you're out there on Twitter trying to get people who you don't know, you've never met or whatever, and you're trying to get them removed from the platform, you're trying to get them to lose their job, you're trying to get people to stop because you don't like one of their, you're not the good guy. Period. Like you're not a good person. Good people don't do that. There are people out there who I vehemently disagree with on certain issues and who I may not even like personally, or they might not, but I'm not trying to stop them from feeding their kids. I'm not trying to make sure they lose their jobs. I'm not trying to get them removed from YouTube or removed from Twitter or removed from, no, that would make me the bad guy. So I think people need to stop being so nice about it. People need to stop having this thing that like, oh, these social justice warriors, they're just, they're the good guys. And maybe they're just a little bit over exuberant. I'm like, no, they're not the good guys. They're bullies. These people are bullies, right? People who mob people on social media, trying to get them kicked off or trying to get them canceled. That you're not a good person. And if everybody collectively or most people would stop throwing them this sort of bone all the time of like, oh, well, they're a good person because, they're pretending to stick up for trans people or they're pretending to stick up for women or they're pretending to stick up for black people or whatever it is. It's like, no, right? Disagree with them and see how they treat you, right? See how quickly they
do eat
right?
their own. They do eat their
exactly.
own. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. There's in the comic book field, there's a writer and artist by the name of Sean Gordon Murphy, and he went through this a few weeks ago. There were people, and they were oh, Sean Gordon Murphy tried to do this when at DC when we were working together, and he like groomed me and this and that, and he took advantage of me and did this, and started saying all this weird stuff, and he's against he's actually not a trans ally, he's not this, he's not, and he actually came out and said, well, I actually helped a friend. I paid for a friend's surgery, so that they could transition and all the, I had kind of talked to him a few times private, and he was very nice to me. He seemed like a really nice guy, and I was like, oh, they tried to get him up out the paint. So it was fortunately he did not lose any jobs, at least any that I know. But I thought that was strange that people that were supposedly on his side.
Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is what I'm saying. Look, people learn it the hard way. J.K. Rowling's learning it the hard way because she's been, she's been sort of someone who's pandered and catered to these people for a while. And look, as soon as you're always going to get outflanked in wokeness, right? There's always going to be someone who is more morally pure in the woke sense than you are, and they will throw you under the bus as soon as there is an opportunity. So it doesn't matter if you're a liberal, right? Conservatives have known this forever, but like it doesn't matter if you think you're a liberal and you think, oh, these are people on my side or what. Like they will throw you to the wolves. They will throw you to the piranhas, and they will come at you as soon as you step out of line. You misgender you use the wrong pronoun, you make the wrong joke, you say something they don't like, you buy a product they don't like, you make a post they don't like. They will come for your head. So stop trying to negotiate with terrorists. Like that's one reason why. Look, this is why people always ask me, like, are you afraid of being canceled? And I'm like, look, I can't be canceled because I never pandered to these people in the first place. So my audience is not the type of people who, if I say something that they disagree with, they're going to try to cancel me. They're going to try to come for me. They're going to, it's like, no, like they already know. Like if they disagree with me, they'll be like, Zuby, I think you're off on this one, or they'll share their opinion or whatever. And that's totally fine. That's mature. That's the adult thing to do, right? Rather than just go and try to make things really bad for this individual. Even if you think they've done something wrong, right? Let's say, something non-criminal, right? Even if you think they've stepped out of line, it's like, give them an opportunity instead of trying to destroy them. Like, because even if someone makes an apology, firstly, never apologize to the mob. Oh, yeah. But if you're going to make an apology, it should come from you. Like a forced apology and a public apology is not a real apology. If I hurt somebody, I will apologize to the individual whom I hurt. It doesn't need to be public. It doesn't need to be forced. It doesn't need to be, it's like, you know what, man, I was out of line, right? I'm sorry I said that. I didn't mean it, cool, right? But when people are being forced into making apologies, then that's just like a struggle session. That's them trying to signal to other people and put fear in other people. That's not the person genuinely making an apology. And it's not even because they want them to. They just want to make an example out of that person and show like, look, this is what happens if you step out of line. And that's all it is. And yeah, I'm not very charitable towards these type of people at all. And I've dealt with them enough to know not to be.
Well, and I'll say this in closing: there was an NFL coach for the Broncos about a month and a half ago, and they started talking. It was a lot of the protests and stuff were going on. People, obviously, businesses were getting destroyed and burnt and all this, and they kind of talked to him, and they put the camera in his face and he said some stuff. And all of a sudden, whoa, he's a racist, all of, and I heard what he said. And I was like, sound like more he was just kind of like, hey, man, these people's businesses are going up and all this kind. And then, he had to come. They brought him to heel and he had to apologize. And I tried to tell people, I was like, look, whether you agree with what he said or not, all you've told him is that he needs to keep quiet about his true feelings. And so you're not going to have real dialogue, a real exchange of diverse ideas if one of the two parties in the conversation is like, well, if I tell the truth, or if I try to have a real conversation, I'm going to be punished for having that conversation. We can't have frank, open dialogue.
Yeah. So
that's a problem. We need to be able to listen to each other and have a real conversation, whether it's uncomfortable or not.
Yeah, and look, we need to. I don't know if this is. Western society moving away from its Christian roots or something, but people need to remember about the concept of forgiveness and salvation, right? Like, even if someone does step out of line, like legitimately, right? We need to be able to offer forgiveness and salvation. And the whole idea that, someone should just be canceled permanently or ostracized forever or whatever is just like, it's insane to me. And it's not kind. It's not kind. It's not tolerant. It's not compassionate, etc. Sometimes people make mistakes. I mean, how are you going to dig up something someone tweeted 8 years ago and you're now trying to hang, you know what I mean? It's just like, come on, man. How immature is that? Like people change, people develop.
To me, like going through, like if you're digging through something I said 10 years ago, that's horseshit.
It's malicious. This is what I mean. It's malicious. Good people don't do that, right? Someone who's trying to make society better and who's trying to add to the world is not doing that. They're not going through your Twitter feed and my Twitter feed and running searches and trying to find something bad that we may have said at some point in our entire lives that they can use as a weapon against us. Like, that's not how good, mature people behave. So again, people need to stop treating these people as if they're some sort of benefit or good to society or that they have the moral high ground. Because every time you give one of these struggle session apologies, every time you say that you're in the wrong, whatever, you're just giving them, you're reinforcing their position as the sort of moral arbiters of the world. Where some of these people are, they're some of the most deeply immoral people that may be out there, because they're the ones trying to like cause all this harm on other people. And most people are busy, most people are decent, most people are just trying to get on with life, take care of themselves, take care of their families, keep in line with the law. And most people aren't out there trying to just create all these problems, which in itself is a miracle, by the way, right? Like, it's amazing that we have far less, it's a shame we have any criminals, but actually in some ways it's kind of surprising we don't have more. And it's great that we don't have more. And it's great that we're not constantly all at each other's throats, and that we can actually the fact that you can even have a city with 10 million people and they're not like beating each other up all the time is pretty miraculous. So let's keep it that way.
All right, so let's take this to a more comical level. Double Down Hustle in the chat goes, Zuby, do you listen to country rap like Jelly Roll or Struggle Jennings? I've actually met Jelly Roll. He lives in Nashville, so he's
cool.
Yeah, I've met him. He's actually a nice guy. Follow him
Nice.
on the gram and on the Twitter. But
Cool.
I don't know if but please tell us what do you listen to American hip hop and all that kind of stuff?
Oh, I listen to tons of American hip hop. I don't listen to much country rap. I know who both of those artists are. I'm familiar with the names, but I'm not that familiar with their music. But I'm sure I'll give them a listen at some point.
Yeah, so
I'm very open-minded.
Jelly Roll's a nice guy. I liked him.
Yeah.
He's very approachable. I reckon, and this is when I first time I met him. I was following him on MySpace, and I was working as a manager at a convenience store, and he happened to come in. And I recognized. I was like, "Wait, man, I'm Jelly." I saw you walk in. He was like, "Yeah, man," shook my hand. Just real nice guy. You know, just kind of kept conversations with him through social media since then. He's real, like I said, nice guy. So, but Zuby, man, this has been a fun. I could talk to you all day. This has been fantastic. I appreciate you being here. I will give you the closing comments, and then I will wrap the show up. Tell people how they can reach out to you and all that. Obviously, you got a lot of people following you already.
Yeah, sure thing. So you can find me on all social media: Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram at Zuby Music, ZUBY Music. And my website is teamzuby.com. If you want to check out my book, merchandise, anything like that, you can find me on there.
All right. And those links are, of course, in the description. All right. So I'm going to be back. I'm doing a double header today. We are going to be talking to Earthworm Jim creator Doug TenNapel at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here. This is one of his books here, Earthworm Jim. Boom. And Earthworm Jim 2 is on Kickstarter right now and has raised over $218,000. So Doug is he's in the poorhouse. He's struggling, but he will be here today at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. He actually is an admirer of yours. He told me when I spoke to him earlier.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, you got him all over the place. We also, again, we're going to put the audio from this live chat on anchor.fm/Ikari Press, and you will also be able to access that on iTunes, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just follow me on one of those, and we can get there. And again, want to acknowledge my dear friend Jamal Baraka and the good folks at Planet EJLBN for agreeing to host this live chat today, and so many others. But that's it, guys. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all at Ikari Press. IkariPress.com takes you to Brand Way of the Gun. We are almost at $30,000 raised. So thank you guys that have been supporting our comics. And, we'll catch you later. Thanks to Zuby. We're out.